Hey guys, Luton here. Now, I'm back with some Total War. Now, I know I don't post Total War or even RTS stuff that often on the channel, but this is something I recorded a while back and I kind of forgot about, and then I was looking through some videos and I found it. I was like, oh, this might actually be kind of interesting. So, if you haven't played Total War that much, or you're new to it, or you're just interested again because Total Warhammer 2 is coming up, this one I thought might be kind of good. Now, what we have here is I'm being attacked by the Beastmen. And as you can see, the balance of power, which is that little yellow and red bar down there in the middle, that shows how strong they are compared to me. So I'm kind of, strength-wise, I'm outnumbered about 2 to 1. Not in physical numbers, but just in strength of my force. Now, if I were to auto-resolve this, in terms of you don't actually have the battle, you just allow the computer to determine like who's going to win, I probably would lose. And it was pretty important to me that I held this territory, I held this land, and I didn't allow this guy with his big rampaging army to just walk all over us and then carry on and maybe kill or even raid some other areas in my territory. So I wanted to fight this guy off, but it was a bit of a decision, and I was just trying to weigh up here what are my chances of actually taking on this guy. I've got a pretty meager force, I would say. I've got some, some standard sword guys, some spear guys, I've got some zombies, I've got some graveguard, and to just explain, like, your standard swords, they're kind of like your attacking guys, your spears are your kind of holders, they're kind of holding the line. Graveguard are the kind of defensive but quite tough, more elite style units. I've got a few other the zombies are just kind of fodder, but they kind of, they're quite good at, I guess, wearing down. And then we've got some other stuff like the direwolves and also fell bats. So yeah, this was a tricky one, and I thought what would be quite good today is to just kind of play you through the thought process and show you how the battle turns out. You're probably expecting that I might lose this battle, but it won't shock you. It's not a big surprise to explain to you that I was able to win this battle. So what I thought I would do is just go through that, just show you how I laid out my units, how I read the terrain, and I even spoke to Flame, who is a hell of a much better Total War player than me, and I don't mind you saying that I kind of asked him for some advice on this one as well, and was like, how do you think that we should play this one? Because, this is a tricky battle, and Flame had a bit of advice in terms of, make sure to use the Graveguard. Obviously, they're the strongest unit, just trying to keep those back, don't get them eliminated too early on, but you'll see as we progress. It's interesting as well because the Beastmen actually have some large units. Okay, they have, I think they're Minotaurs, and those guys are my biggest issue to defeat and destroy. So to begin with, now we're at the deployment screen. So this is where we can see where my army is, and if you're able to, see where the enemy army is. Now you may have some hidden units that you're not able to see. Sometimes you can see very little of the enemy army, sometimes you can see more. But in this screen right now, I can see where my guys are, and I can see where generally they are. And with any of these kind of like ancient battles, that's kind of how you used to have this. You'd have pitched battles across the battlefield, and that's how most battles in Total War play out. You'll have some city siege battles which play differently, but most of the time it's this kind of pitch battle affair where you have to try and read the land. You have to try and work out what's going to give you an advantage. Obviously, usually having a high ground is going to give you some advantage. You can often hide units within trees. Some units are going to fight better within that kind of terrain than others. And working out how to use your mounted units, perhaps, things like this, or your heavy units, trying to work out where you can best position your heavy units to do the most damage possible. Now, what I needed to do here was to protect myself from those heavy units, because the Beastmen, they've got these Minotaur guys who are heavies. They throw giant rocks. So if I leave my units out in the open, what is going to happen right there is they're just going to throw those rocks a massive way. I also started off bad here because I gambled. Okay, I gambled on my magic lance, which dropped down, so that was not good for me either. Heroes wise as well, you've got your heroes, and they're actually really, really powerful in Total War Warhammer. The heroes can sustain a lot of damage. It's kind of crazy actually. Often you'll see heroes fighting off maybe even 2 or 3 units. They can last quite a while against a lot of people. I often think it's kind of a little bit insane. I think they should be able to handle 1 unit by themselves and not much more than that, or it should have some large penalty. But they're supposed to be, like heroes. They're supposed to the characters essentially, and characters in Warhammer or Warhammer 40k or whatever you're playing usually can deal with quite a lot by themselves. They're much more powerful than just your standard bread and butter units. So my thinking here with my layout in terms of how I'm going to deploy, obviously the main thing, like I said, I need to do, they have, if we go over and you always want to kind of have a look, see what they've got. Now here's these Minotaurs, these guys are going to be throwing these giant rocks at me, and they can hurl those. Not only do those rocks obviously land within my units, they'll roll, and they do a lot of damage. They don't have many ranged units, they don't have many fast units. Okay, if you look, see most of the rest is like swords or spears or whatever. You know, they're kind of, it's all pretty standard stuff. So they don't have like any mounted units, they don't have any cavalry, they don't have any archers or ranged units other than those minotaurs. So I don't have a lot to worry about there. So my best hope is to stay back and try and bait them to me. So that means trying to find the best defensive position that I can. Bear in mind that their force strength is about 2 to 1 for me. Again, not in literal numbers, just in strength. So what I need to do, they do have, obviously you can see over there, they've got some fast units. Again, they got like animals like me, so we've got some faster units as well. But those guys not going to be any real worry. So my plan really is to try and hold the terrain, try and use the forest to my advantage. Keep the units within the forest, try and keep them as hidden as possible. Try and allow them to come up to me and get caught in a kind of, you know, bottleneck. I want to try and essentially I want to try and kettle the I want to try and kettle the enemy. The other thing is what I want to try and do is pull their force away from those minotaurs, so I can then send my faster units like the bats, okay, send them out to deal with those minotaurs without them being destroyed really quickly by some of the other units on the battlefield. And if I can break up their units away and I can wear them down, I can exhaust them, tire them bit by bit, all the better. What I want to try and do as well is I want to try and make sure that I keep my Graveguard in a strong position, so that I only have like those 2 Graveguard units, so I need to try and keep them in a strong position so they don't get wiped out quickly by mistake or something like this. I actually, as I recall, I think I make one error with that, and it's an error which I don't think it costs me, but it's an error that's worth highlighting, and I'll highlight that again to you guys later on. It's basically where you tell a unit, like, hey, don't automatically go chasing after. I think I actually mentioned this back in my beginner tutorial when Total Warhammer came out, is that it's a very, very easy thing to do. You can actually change it in your settings to not allow units to just chase after a unit. So let's say another enemy unit decides to break, okay, and they start retreating. If they start to retreat and run away, your units will often chase after that guy, but that's really bad often, because it often means that you're trying to manage other things on the battlefield. That unit will just start to chase after an enemy unit which is broken, and then suddenly you find your unit is ran like really far away from where everybody else is, and that's obviously not a good thing, because then they can become isolated, they get picked off, so it's generally not something you want to happen. Right, I'm just going to skip forward now to where we've got the units laid out, and I'll talk about it there. And also, one of the reasons why I'm looking at this again is because Total Warhammer 2 is coming out pretty soonish, you know, and I'm very interested in that game, looking forward to that game, and I've been a big fan of Total War, and also, of course, just Warhammer and stuff in general for ages, so the two kind of things go together, and I didn't play this very much first time around on the channel anyway, but it's something I would like to cover, because I do enjoy RTS. I'd even like to throw a little bit more RTS in on the channel, and you know, basically, it's not a million miles away in terms of what we do with Arma Zeus, in terms of the view that you get there. So I would be interested in throwing a little bit more here and there and see how we do with that too. But anyway, so here's my layout. Now what I can do, you can see I've got some reserve units further down the hill there, okay? I've got my Graveguard right here, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep those guys in a safe, secure position. I've got my hero and characters also held back. I don't want those guys to be taken down too quickly. I want them to be able to support the units that I've got on the ground. Most of my main attacking force here, okay, so most of my just skeletal melee guys are just in the forest there. Again, what I'm trying to do is use up my expendable units first of all. I don't really want them to get absolutely destroyed, but I'm trying to use them up quickly. I have got my dire wolves and my fell bats off on that other side, the other side of the battlefield for me, and I'm trying to keep those guys hidden as well, so I can bring them out and surprise the enemy units. I've got some spearmen to kind of hold them as they come into the tree line here, but again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep one unit right out there in the middle, just open, plain to see, because I want them to try and be baited by that guy. I want to try and pull them up there. Now, again, playing the AI versus playing a human player is very different. Okay, if you're playing against a human player, you probably wouldn't win this battle, because a human player wouldn't be stupid enough to kind of get baited in. But a human unit would probably figure it out. They'd probably send like some investigating units. They've got some wolves as well. They'd probably send some units up here to kind of investigate, see what's what, and they'd have a better idea of what's going on, or we'd play push and pull for a little bit, going backwards and forwards and try and figure it out. But when you're playing against AI, if you're playing against a computer, it's going to be a little bit different, and you need to figure it out. Nonetheless, they still outnumber me in terms of force strength. Now you can see actually when I'm on the battlefield that the balance of power, according to there, is showing kind of 50-50. It's not the case. You'll see as it goes along it becomes quite challenging. So off we go, we start. Now, I'm not going to commentate through the entirety of this battle, but we will sort of do maybe the beginning, the middle, and the end. So let's just see how they start off. Now, again, initially, look, see what's happening. They're getting pulled up towards where I want them to be. Okay, and no actual great sort of strength of formation here, but they are kind of keeping the units generally sort of held in two main groups. The heavy units, the Minotaurs, are sort of pushing up on that flanking side there, which is where I want them to be. I want them, if anything, to try and break away. They move slower than the rest of those units that they have, so generally that's what I want them to try and do. I want them to try and... the other guys to kind of push up those Minotaur units to break away. This guy there, you can see he's kind of walking straight in the middle, so he's less exposed. But they're moving in pretty... okay, here we go. See, straight away, he's hurling those big rocks. And... again, look, see, they can see these units, and look, that's smash into there. But when you got those trees and the forest, it's going to be not as effective. It'll still be effective, but not as effective if they were just standing way out in the open there. Now, I can use this opportunity. See, they've broken away. See, both units have broken away. This will often happen when you have artillery units as well, is that they will sort of stay away there. I'm going to send my Fellbats over. Again, you might have thought, what units are you sending right through them? Those are the Fellbats, remember, so they can just fly over the top of the guys on the ground. I don't need to worry about that. My dire wolves, you can see, which were hidden, are coming in across towards the other Minotaur, so they're keeping him in contention, they're keeping him harassed. Now, the only problem that I have is that these units, the wolves and the bats, are probably not going to be strong enough to really do much damage, if anything, to the Minotaurs, okay? But what they may do is they may keep them occupied long enough to not have my guys get obliterated while I try to deal some damage to their units on the ground. So that's really the objective here. I'm not really trying to get the Minotaurs, the heavies over there, get them killed outright. I'm just trying to keep them occupied whilst I deal with the rest of these guys here and try and do that. Now again, what I'm really trying to do is I'm just trying to hold them as they come in. See, they haven't pushed forward in a really big way, but what I'm trying to do is just kind of hold the line, try and trap them here in this forest, and sort of let them come in. I want them to actually come in toward me so that I can try to sort of kettle and surround them basically and pincer and lock them in there. I'm going to send my Grave Guard, okay, up here on the right hand side, the right flank, so that I can, again, if I am able to, push them around on the side to try and, you know, as I say, surround or attack the weaker flanks of the enemy as they're coming in here. Now you can see what I'm doing here is I'm trying to move some zombies up. You look at that first unit that I had up there has been obliterated almost straight away. A combination of axe and spearmen there, just sort of holding and battling and wearing them down. Now, I don't want to... the reason is I could obviously send just most of my units up here to get in the fight. I just don't want to send that many units in straight away. I don't want those guys to end up in a kind of just chaotic mess of a battle. I want to try and have a little bit more control about how I'm handling my units and sending them around here. You know, when you're sending those wide flanking maneuvers and so on, it's usually to kind of just get them moving, and then you'll come back and see where they are and assess them. So most of the time, if you make like a fast maneuver of kind of sending the guys around like this, sometimes that's like right there. That's what I wanted them to do with the Grave Guard a minute ago, where I just flicked them around the corner. I don't necessarily anticipate that they're actually going to get to that point, but it kind of gives them the vague direction of where I want them to go, and then you can always go back, check that unit, correct it, move it however you want it to. So it's not necessary that just every movement is definitive. It's just to get them moving in the right direction, because whilst the battle is going on, units will take a while to move around. So as you move around, you're constantly trying to see, like, okay, where's this guy, where's this guy, where's this guy? You might have to make corrections, because the enemy's going to, you know, change direction themselves. They're going to make all sorts of different moves as well. So again, you see what I was able to do right here with that unit that I'd sent away. The other enemy had kind of flanked around onto us, so I was able to change direction and bring that guy, so that that enemy unit is completely sandwiched. They're basically trapped between two of my units, and that should be easier to kind of wear them down and break them down. Now again, we're doing alright here, but obviously, again, like we saw from the beginning, it's a strong force compared to mine, so my guys are kind of like holding their own, but I wouldn't say we were making any good progress at this point in time. Let's skip forward a little bit. Okay, now we skipped forward just about 5 minutes here, but there's an interesting little thing. I think originally I said that they had no ranged units other than those Minotaurs. I was wrong, actually. They did have one ranged unit. As I say, I played this a little while ago and I found this footage. I was like, oh yeah, I want to put this on. But happily, I have my kind of Fellbats and the Wolves, and those guys are actually out in the field here, just harassing. Because basically, when some of these enemy units break and run away, they were able to actually actively disengage. So what I was doing was using those Bats and Wolves to kind of harass and wear down the fleeing units and try and, you know, break them down as much as possible. possible. And that's, you know, now that I've got those guys free, I can attack that ranged unit. That's the good thing as well, is if you have some kind of mounted units or flying units, you're really able to harass. Okay, you can see, look straight away. See, those guys have you know, they've broken straight away and moved away there. Okay, now the rest of my units, again, it's still not looking fantastic. Again, we're sort of holding the line, I would say, just about, but that is about all. The reason the enemy units sort of are maybe, I guess, just around sort of 50-50 with us right now is still those Minotaurs. I haven't had a lot of success with wearing down those Minotaurs. You can't see it here, but yeah, those Minotaurs are still being problematic for me. They're not right next to us right now, but they are still a threat, so I'm trying to keep an eye on that. But mainly the issue that we have right now is all the units that we have on the field, everybody is getting quite exhausted and worn down. You can see all of my units here are either doing badly or they're around about 50%. My characters are the main guys, the heroes, are sort of definitely doing very well. They're holding in. But yeah, everything else is not going too smoothly. So I'm trying to bring in units yet again. Okay, look, see, still the Minotaur over here. Okay, we've worn him down a little bit, but not very much. So I'm trying to send the wolves in. Again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stop him from throwing those rocks. I'm trying to stop those guys from having any effect on the battlefield. I brought some of my bats back into the mix here as well, because I want to strengthen up and try and you know, reinforce some of the units that I do have on the field. I also, what I was doing before, like I said, when they're in the open, I'm trying to send my bats after units which have broken and are weak, and I'm trying to sort of basically stop them from easily re-engaging or make sure that they are completely wiped out. What really worked for me in this battle was actually ensuring that we held up those heavy units, those Minotaurs. That was the key thing. Using this little bottlenecked area of terrain was also decent, because it enabled, with the forest, it meant that I could actually keep my units held well together. It does obviously reduce my maneuverability, but just by bringing those units in and kind of holding them in this area, it means I have managed to kind of contain them in this space, rather than have... Now this is what I was talking about, the big mistake. Look, this is what can happen if you don't have your units properly under control. They can chase after other enemy units, and that was a strong unit. That was literally the worst thing that I wanted to happen right there, and that's actually a big mistake. Letting that unit push away and kind of get right out of the area at this critical time when I need it, that is actually a really terrible mistake. So that's a very bad black mark for me. But you can see, look, a lot of the units, the enemy units, they've got exhausted at this point in time. They had to cover that big area of ground in the first place to get up here. They've been battling through in this territory, in the forest area, and now they've sort of tried to break away to try and sort of regroup, reinforce, etc. And this is a good time for me to sort of go on the offensive now. We've been on the defensive for most of the time through this battle, but now they're sort of breaking away. This is a good opportunity where I have the ability to kind of make the charge. Now, my mistake that I made actually ended up being not quite as bad as it could have been, because a lot of those units that just broke away, you could see right there, ended up re-engaging my stronger unit out here in the field. So that actually ended up being a kind of not as bad as it could have been. And this is also where I start to use my hero, my character more. I've been kind of keeping him back. But basically what you can see right there as well is the Beastman character. He's right in the middle of maybe 3 of my units right there, or two or three units anyway. Yeah, right here, like you can see in the middle of the screen. He's just like happily battling those. But bear in mind, they're only about sort of like 30% strength at this time, so you know, he's dealing with it right there. But I think I end up bringing my own character back towards him eventually, because you can see, just like, look at this guy. He's like, I mean, he's, like I say, they're very weak units, but he's just able to completely handle that, and he's taking barely any damage whatsoever as well. I think in the distance you can still see, yeah, the Minotaur is not defeated. He's sort of still coming back. So that's the thing, those Minotaurs, those real strong units, they're not only just very strong, but it's difficult to get to them, because they're going to keep them back. And because they're ranged, they can just throw stuff at you. So it's actually hard for me to dedicate units to get away. If I didn't have those fell bats and I didn't have those direwolves, I'd have been completely screwed. I wouldn't have had anything that I could send towards them. Ranged units, possibly, but even then it would have been tricky, because it depends on how easily I would have been able to get my units towards them. Not only that, but I didn't want to expose my guys out in the open and allow the rock-throwing Minotaurs to just absolutely destroy them before they even got near, and that's what would have happened. Right, you can see again, look, that what I'm doing now is there's very few enemy units out here in the main field, so I'm trying to stop them from kind of reinforcing now. I've got 2 units there and 1 other unit, so they're absolutely holding their own. The other remaining units that I do have left around are just kind of clearing up and controlling, but the main enemy strength, you can see, is still actually from that hero character. I probably should have, at this point, sent him in a little bit sooner so that he could actually help assist my other units on the ground there, deal with that guy and wear him down. Because this ends up actually being the thing which takes the longest in this battle, unbelievably, is actually wearing down those heroes, those characters. They're probably the most dangerous thing, actually, in Total War Warhammer. They are very, very powerful. I think even to the point you could say they're a little too powerful. Like, it's kind of crazy how much it takes to wear those guys down. But at the same time, I suppose if you have, like, a special, you know, hero character, you don't want them to just get obliterated straight out of the gate. You want them to survive and be strong, but also bear in mind he's actually fighting those quite weakened units there. But yeah, this is where we are coming towards the end now, and you can see I kind of have got things in control. Unbelievably, look, like I say, the balance of power is still pretty strong for the enemy, even at this point in time. And again, that's because a lot of my units have been weakened, and we still have that strong enemy character in there as well. But, you know, looking back on this battle, I think I could have done definitely a lot better at some points in time. There was a few mistakes that I'd made where I'd pushed units out too far, or maybe we didn't react quickly enough to some of the enemy movements and things like this. So that's the kind of thing you want to be kind of taking on board and learning. It's like I say with any game, whether it's armor, whether it's this, whether it's any kind of like battle game, the most important thing is to look at what you did and then think like, okay, what did I do wrong there? What did I do right there? What can I learn from? What can I improve? What can I change every single time? Those are the kind of lessons you want to be taking away. And I thought this was a good battle, particularly in the sense that I was well, not outnumbered, but in terms of, like I said at the start, strength, I was outnumbered in terms of strength. And look, even now, see, look, now look, that right there, what that Minotaur just did to that unit, that is what I didn't want them to do right from the beginning. Now, this would have been a very, very, very different situation had I allowed those Minotaurs to do stuff like that right out of the gate. Can you even imagine? Those Minotaur characters are ridiculously powerful. Look how far away he is, and look how accurately he was able to place that gigantic projectile right onto my units. And those units were the main reason for that imbalance of power right out at the beginning, because I didn't really have anything to counter them with. I didn't really have a lot to deal with them. As I've said a few times through this video now, just dealing with those guys and having the direwolves and the fellbats able to control those, even if all they were doing was harassing them. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes if you can just harass those other units enough whilst your guys wither down and deal with the enemy and try and, you know, gain some kind of upper hand, then you can always potentially counter them later. So it's not always that you've got to deal with them straight out of the gate. But then, as you see towards the end here, we're still just trying to battle this guy down, just wither him down towards the end here. My guys are just kind of holding in there. You know, this was not a stellar victory by any means, but it was a victory. It was a victory in a battle that originally I was like, I'm not sure if I can win this. So it shows even when the kind of numbers or the, you know, the balance of power, the odds are against you, you can still turn it around. It's a Pyrrhic victory, but it's a victory nonetheless. It's a victory on a battle that I didn't necessarily know if I was going to be able to win at the start because of that imbalance of power, and that's why it was a good victory. You know, it felt good to be able to have that battle, assess the enemy, turn it around. That's what's fun about this game, is trying to, you know, figure out what is going on in each battle, try and take them down. But as you've seen before when I played against Flame, you know, playing against other players with PvP is even better. So maybe I'll do a little bit of that in the future if you guys want. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, guys. I'll see you next time for some more Total War.